The top stories tonight in Y News. The Philippine Health Insurance Corporation will collect higher contributions from its members beginning June.
The national government's outstanding debt jacked up to a new high of 12.68 trillion pesos in March.
President Rodrigo Duterte has appointed Police Lieutenant General Vicente Danao as officer in charge of the Philippine National Police to replace General Leonardo Carlos.
The Department of Tourism is eyeing to transform the Philippines into a top medical tourism destination.
Good evening, Philippines and the world. Today is Thursday, the 5th of May, 2022. Join us in the next hour as we deliver today's top stories around the Philippines and in other parts of the world. I am William Pio.
We are also seen in 1,935 satellite monitoring centers nationwide and via live streaming worldwide through the UNTV News and Rescue social media accounts and our website, untvweb.com. I am Mariela Toza.
First in the news, the Philippine Health Insurance Corporation, or PhilHealth, is set to implement a contribution rate hike for its members. The new premium rate is expected to be implemented next month. Janice Inhente will tell us why.
After 1.5-year reprieve amid the COVID-19 pandemic, state insurer PhilHealth announced it is finally pushing through with a scheduled premium contribution hike this year. From the 3% premium contribution rate, it will increase to 4% of a member's salary, with employers shouldering half of it. A worker earning 10,000 a month will have to shell out 200 pesos and the employer another 200 pesos for a total of 400 pesos. The monthly premium contribution could go as high as 4,800 pesos for those earning up to 80,000 pesos per month. Meanwhile, PhilHealth members expressed their frustrations over the rate hike.
Talagang madagdag na pasakit talaga, dagdag na pabigat talaga. Yun nga, as in pandemic na nga, nagdagdag pa tayo ng pasakit sa mga tao.
Sa masusunod na buwan, ang gagawin ko na lang po, ibabudget ko na lang po yung pera ko. Yung dating ginagastos ko po for load, babawasan ko na lang po para meron pong matira para sa PhilHealth contributions ko every month. Talagang need po talagang magtipid, lalo na madadagdagan po yung monthly contributions namin. Kung ganun man po, sana madagdagan din yung benefits namin as a PhilHealth member.
PhilHealth said the increase was mandated by the Universal Healthcare Act that aims to cover even the poorest Filipinos. Janice Inhente, UNTV, News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
The Philippine inflation rises to 4.9% in April 2022. Meanwhile, the national government's outstanding debt hit a record of 12.68 trillion pesos as of March 2022. Rosa Licos explains why.
The inflation rate of the country rose to 4.9% in April 2022, according to Philippine Statistics Authority or PSA. This is 0.9% higher than the March 2022 inflation rate. PSA said April inflation rate is the fastest in 3 years' time. The increase in inflation was mainly brought by higher annual increase in the index for food, non-alcoholic beverages, transport, housing, water, electricity, gas, and other fuels. According to Malacanang, the Duterte administration will work double time to address the socio-economic concerns of the people while taming high prices of goods and commodities. Meanwhile, the Bureau of Treasury reported the country's outstanding debt at 12.68 trillion pesos in end of March 2022. 30.1% of this was sourced externally, while 69.9% were domestic borrowings. 586.29 billion pesos or 4.8% of the total debt portfolio was added primarily due to the net issuance of government securities to both local and external lenders. Malacanang assured that the country's recent borrowings would be for the COVID-19 response and recovery. The government also needs to sustain the country's long-term socio-economic growth and development. Rosa Licoz, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
The Commission on Elections, or Comelec, says it cannot delist dead registered voters a few days before the national elections. Meanwhile, the Commission reminds voters of what not to do in voting centers on Election Day. Rosa Licoz is back with this report.
The Commission on Elections have reiterated the things voters should refrain from doing in voting centers on May 9, 2022. On Election Day, voters are prohibited to wear clothes or even face mask with their preferred candidate's face or name, as it is considered campaigning. Distribution of sample ballots and campaign materials at voting centers are also not allowed.
Wala po tayong pakialam din kahit anong kulay po ng suot nyo na t-shirt. Basta sana lang po yung mga t-shirts na isusuot natin, wala lang din pong imahe o yung nagsasabing iboto ang isang kandidato, sapagkat again, mula Mayo 8 po, Mayo 8 pa lamang ay bawal na pong magkampanya ang ating mga partido politikal at mga kandidato.
Voters will not be prohibited from bringing their mobile phones in polling precincts, but Commissioner Garcia appeals that they should refrain from using it while voting. Taking photos of the ballot or selfie inside a voting center is not allowed. An individual can bring with them a list of their preferred candidates. Voters are implored not to loiter in polling precinct after casting their ballots or swap stories with their fellow voters. Meanwhile, parents are also discouraged to bring their kids in voting centers amid threat of COVID-19. Comelec also said apart from vote buying and selling, betting on who will win in the elections is also an election offense. Meanwhile, the poll body cannot remove the names of the deceased from the voters' list. According to Comelec, the period for delisting has already lapsed. Also, it is the local civil registrar who should release the death certificate to Comelec before delisting the deceased voters.
Ang naging solusyon po sana ng Comelec ay kausapin po natin yung Civil Registrar General na sana mag-issue ng certification para sa buong Pilipinas, para po kami ay kami na lang po mag-i-inform sa local Comelec namin. Subalit siyempre nga po ay meron po kasing fee na babayaran kapag kami mga certification, wala po kasi sa budget namin at
Comelec, on the other hand, assured that there is a system for the Board of Election Inspectors to double-check if a person is allowed to vote or not through the election computer voters list. The list includes the picture and biometrics of all registered voters. The Comelec also appealed to the Congress to amend Republic Act 8189 or the Voters Registration Act of 1996 after the national elections. Rosa Licoz, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
Meanwhile, the Department of National Defense has not monitored any credible threat that will disrupt the upcoming elections. Eileen Cerudo will tell us why.
Most of the cases reported to the Armed Forces of the Philippines during election period are isolated cases. According to Department of National Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana, these cases pose no pressing threat to the overall election process.
Generally, it will be a very peaceful election.
Apart from the Philippine National Police, the military forces will also provide assistance in maintaining peace and order while Filipinos cast their votes on Monday. They will monitor the entire election process until the end of the canvassing of votes. Secretary Lorenzana said they have not received any information about a possible threat to the security on Election Day and even after. The official explains election crimes are already common in some areas, but these are merely isolated cases.
Meron lang sigurong, alam mo naman sa Pilipinas, hindi mawawala yung mga awayan ng mga kandidato. So meron yan. But it is very isolated at saka konti lang yan. Now after election, I don't think magkakaroon tayo ng kaguluhan.
He also assures there is enough military presence, especially in election hotspots identified by the Commission on Elections. There are 40,000 soldiers ready to be deployed in various areas to provide security.
Jive kasi yan, combine yan yung PNP at saka yung armed forces. Ngayon, ang ginagawa ng Comelec pagka yung election ay deputize niya ng Comelec yung AFP para mayroon silang police powers na katulad ng PNP.
Opo.
So ngayon, meron tayong 40,000 na military ang naghahanda na tumulong na mapanatili yung kapayapaan sa eleksyon.
Meanwhile, Secretary Lorenzana warned candidates of disqualification if they give in to communist rebels by paying them the permit to campaign fees. The official advised candidates to immediately report to the authorities any cases of extortion, and an immediate response is assured. Aileen Cerudo, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
President Rodrigo Duterte has appointed Police Lieutenant General Vicente Danao Jr. as officer in charge of the Philippine National Police to replace General Leonardo Carlos, who is set to retire on May 8, 2022. Leia Ilagad reports why.
Police Lieutenant General Vicente Danao Jr. will act as the officer in charge of the Philippine National Police effective Sunday, May 8, 2022, according to DILG Secretary Eduardo Año. Danao will serve as PNP OIC until the next elected president will choose the PNP chief. Danao is the concurrent Deputy Chief for Operations and Commander of the Special Task Force for National and Local Elections 2022. Before he became the number 3 man in the PNP command, he became the Chief Directorial Staff and Director of the National Capital Region Police Office. He also served as the Director of the Police Regional Office 4A and District Director of the Manila Police District. Outgoing PNP Chief Police General Leonardo Carlos urged the 225,000-strong police force to rally behind the leadership of Lieutenant General Danao. Danao, a member of PMA Sambisig class of 1991, will still have more than a year in service before he reaches his mandatory retirement age of 56 on August 2023. Leia Ilagan, UNTV, News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
President Rodrigo Duterte declares May 9 a special non-working holiday throughout the country. This is to allow the Filipino people to exercise their right to vote. Malacanang formally declared this through Proclamation number 1357. The Commission on Elections requested the President to declare the election day a special non-working holiday to allow a greater voter turnout.
The Commission on Elections is now addressing the reported effects of more than 300 vote counting machines during the final testing and sealing. The poll body ensures the issues on the machines are minimal. Nel Maribohok will tell us why.
The Commission on Elections has established 8 technical hubs nationwide for the repair of vote counting machines. Comelec Commissioner Marlon Casquejo, head of the steering committee for the May 2022 polls, assured the voters that most of the VCMs to be used on election day are all functional. He said out of the 70,000 VCMs tested, only 355 are up for replacement.
So we only have 355 defective or VCM needs to be replaced. As compared in 2019, masyadong mababa ito. Because in 2019, on the first day of the FTS, nagkaroon kaagad tayo ng 500 defective VCMs.
The VCMs are now being fixed in Santa Rosa, and according to Casquejo, the defects encountered are easy to fix since they are more mechanical.
So I can assure everyone, the public, the political parties, the candidates, that there will be no problem in our vote counting machines, and we have established a VCM Repair Hub which will address all the issues pertaining to the defective vote counting machines.
The report of Casquejo came after the camp of presidential candidate Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. urged the poll body to look into reports of non-working VCMs. Attorney Victor Rodriguez, Chief of Staff and spokesman of Marcos, expressed worries that the conduct of elections may experience delay when the problems on VCMs are not timely addressed. Nel Maribuhok, UNTV News and Rescue, we serve the people, we give glory to God.
The Commission on Elections said it is prepared to facilitate the upcoming local and national elections on Monday. Dante Amento tells us why.
Comelec Packing and Shipping Committee Head Commissioner Amy Ferolino has disclosed that the deployment of election materials, paraphernalia among others, are almost finished. All the vote counting machines or VCMs, broadband global area networks or BGANs, ballot boxes, official ballots, and the consolidation and canvassing system or CCS kits are already deployed.
As of May 5 today, we have already dispatched 100% of the VCMs, 100% as well for the BGAN, and 99.81% for VCM external batteries. We are now only waiting for 206 which are from the training.
Meanwhile, Commissioner George Erwin Garcia disclosed they will ask the Armed Forces of the Philippines to allow the use of AFP's air assets, including the Black Hawk helicopters, to transport possible defective VCMs during the elections to the Comelec regional repair hubs.
We are now utilizing the Philippine Coast Guard. Yung lahat po ng gamit ng Philippine Coast Guard ay ino-offer nila sa atin na para nagamitin pati po yung personnel po nila. In fact, may coordination na po ang Comelec through our DEDO, Deputy Executive Director for Operation, na lahat ng air assets ng Armed Forces will be given to us in case of necessity para isakay yung mga vote counting machines na kung sakasakali on election day ay masisira at kakailangan na i-repair para mabilis air assets kagad ang gagamitin.
The AFP, the Philippine National Police, and the Philippine Coast Guard personnel are the deputized arms of the Commission tasked to maintain peaceful, free, and fair elections. Dante Amento, UNTV, News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
Vice Presidential candidate Manny S.D. Lopez and Presidential candidate Ernesto Abella faced the panel interview on the third day of the Comelec KBP Forum. The candidates discussed their plans for economic development and social reform. JP Nunez reports.
Vice Presidential candidate Manny S.D. Lopez will push an amendment to the People's Initiative and Referendum Act should he be elected as the next Vice President of the country. During the third day of the panel interview of the Comelec KBP organized forum, he said it was his top priority. He believes the amendment would provide the ordinary Filipino citizen a participation to decide on policy making for the general public's welfare.
Number one ko pong advokasya ay maamyendahan ang People's Initiative and Referendum Act sapagkat ito po ang people empowerment measure that will allow ordinary citizens and groups of citizens to launch a people's initiative through a functional law.
He is also willing to be appointed as the Secretary of the Department of Trade and Industry to push for his project, which will open more job opportunities for the Filipinos. Lopez also presented a sample pamphlet which he said to be an example of guaranteed fund from the government which Filipino can loan for their livelihood needs.
Kung ito pong salapi na binibigyan nating halaga ngayon dito sa ating pamphlet na ito, sa ating leaflet na ito, na every Filipino, bawat Pilipino ay pwedeng umutang hanggang 100,000, direktamente po magagamit nila ang salaping yan upang sa kanilang bigyan ng solusyon ang kanilang mga iba't ibang pangangailangan. And that will revive the economy.
Meanwhile, presidential candidate Ernesto Abella gave emphasis on making agriculture a mega industry. Abella explains that he personally observed the reason why millions of Filipinos work abroad is because of hunger.
Baba talaga na ng agrikultura. We only spend so much on agriculture. So what we would really like to do is make it a mega industry along with IT, digital, along with education and health.
The presidential candidate would also want to establish an economic development for the country in the next 100 years. He said he will create an institutionalized plan which the next generation of administration will follow for their policy making.
I would continue a lot of the good things that the president has done, and I would talk to the next one and say, let's do it this way. And then the third one, if we could establish a train, a policy train, a way, a perspective, na kung the next several presidents to be able to build a solid foundation for the peaceful economic rise of the Philippines, a siglo Filipino. And if we did that, and with the participation of our mga kababayan natin, we could have a nation that is worthy of the Philippines.
Tomorrow, May 6, will be the last episode of Pilipinas Forum 2022, which will feature the tandem of presidential candidate Jose Montemayor Jr. and his running mate Rizalito David, while presidential candidate Senator Manny Pacquiao will be the last candidate for the panel interview. The Comelec is hoping that the forum would help voters choose the right candidate to vote on the elections. JP Nunez, UNTV, News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
Meanwhile, the Robredo-Pangilinan tandem is making the most out of the campaign period by visiting more provinces and supporters. Harleen Delgado has this story.
Independent presidential candidate Vice President Leni Robredo goes back to Mindanao as the campaign trail reaches its final days. There, Robredo attended a multi-sectoral assembly in the city of Oroquieta, where she was welcomed by pink-clad supporters. In her speech, the Vice President underscored the need to push back on fake news.
Pero kahit Supreme Court na nagsabi, ang fake news patuloy pa din hanggang ngayon. Ang sinasabi pa din, nandaya pa din ako ng eleksyon at nakakalungkot hanggang ngayon, naniniwala pa din ang marami sa ating mga kababayan.
She also assured that under her presidency, the government will be closer to the people.
Ganito po ang pinapangako namin na magiging ganitong klaseng public servants na hindi kami makukontento na nandun lang kami sa Malacanang. Nasa aming air-conditioned na mga opisina naghihintay ng mga report. Pero magiging working president po tayo.
Robredo also visited Agusan del Sur and attended a people's rally. In the 2016 vice presidential race, Robredo won in both provinces. Meanwhile, her running mate, Senator Francis Kiko Pangilinan, goes to one of the considered bailiwicks of Bongbong Marcos, the province of Ilocos Sur. There, Pangilinan was welcomed by their Ilocano supporters at a concert rally held in Vigan. The senator also visited several areas in Quezon Province, including Sariaya, Lucena City, Tayabas City, and Lukban, where he bagged the support of various sectors, including farmers and fisherfolk. Robredo will be going back to her bailiwick Bicol region tomorrow to attend rallies in Sorsogon and Legazpi City. A meeting de avance will be held in Naga City on Friday night, while another will be held in the city of Makati and Metro Manila on Saturday. Harleen Delgado, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
Presidential candidate Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. sustained his lead in the OCTA Research April 2022 Elections Nationwide Survey. Aiko Miguel reports why.
There were 2,400 respondents on the Tugon ng Masa survey conducted by the OCTA research team. According to the group, respondents were from NCR, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao region. Based on the poll survey results, presidential candidate Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. has 58% preferential rating. Vice President Lenny Robredo with 25%. Manila City Mayor Isko Moreno Dumagoso with 8%. Senator Manny Pacquiao, 5%. Senator Ping Lacson, 2%. Followed by presidential candidates Faisal Mangondato, Norberto Gonzales, and Calyodi de Guzman. OCTA Research Fellow Professor Ranjit Rai explained poll survey results are not cast in stone or permanently fixed.
So ito ay isang estimate lang ng period na to at sa aming palagay hindi ito kumbaga hindi ito nakataga sa bato. Okay? And magbabago pa po ito.
The group also emphasized that the Commission on Elections acknowledges the legality of poll surveys, but OCTA Research Fellow Professor Guido David also said that the country cannot declare a winner based on survey results alone.
We encourage na lumabas sila to exercise their constitutional right para sa ating demokrasya. Yung numbers na nakita natin sa COVID so far, wala pa namang pagtaas ng bilang ng kaso. Magandang balita yan, so huwag tayong kakabahan na lumabas at bumoto.
Meanwhile, OCTA reminds the public to be responsible in following the safety and health protocols against COVID-19. This is because a resurgence of COVID-19 cases can occur anytime. OCTA projects 500 to 1,000 cases per day in NCR if a surge happens again. Aiko Miguel, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
The Department of Tourism plans to boost medical tourism in the country. The agency also targets to promote such option in the global market. Asher Kadapan Jr. will tell us why live. Yes, Asher, go ahead.
Mariel, the pandemic-induced crisis brought into light the importance of medical travel and wellness tourism. Secretary Bernadette Romulo Puyat explains this as the Department of Tourism sees the big potential of the health and wellness industry in boosting medical tourism in the country. Puyat stressed that the Philippines is poised to become an attractive destination for medical tourism with world-class hospitals and facilities, skilled doctors and nurses, and the Filipino brand of hospitality. With this, the DOT targets to attract more international arrivals for the purpose of receiving medical care in the Philippines. The Tourism Secretary further shares that the government has been implementing measures that will develop the country as a medical tourism destination. This includes increasing public awareness for such option in the global market. The DOT says they have developed a gold standard in approaching health and safety for meetings, incentives, conferences and exhibitions, or MICE events, as well as institutionalizing health and safety in tourism activities. Puyat also cited the DOT's ongoing coordination with relevant national government agencies as well as local government units to get tourism workers vaccinated against COVID-19. So far, the vaccination drive led to a 98% inoculation rate for tourism workers, which helped restore confidence of people to travel to and within the Philippines. Mariel?
Thank you, Asher Kadapan Jr. reporting live from Quezon City.
The European Union called for a ban on oil imports from Russia as it continues to bombard railroad stations and other supply line targets across Ukraine. Joselito Liquido will tell us why live. Yes, Joselito, go ahead.
Good evening, William. The attacks on Ukraine's rail infrastructure were meant to disrupt the delivery of Western weapons into the country, according to Russian Defense Ministry spokesman Major General Igor Konashenkov. In Mariupol, Mayor Vadim Boychenko said that the Russian forces were targeting the already shattered Azovstal plant, inflicting misery among trapped civilians through heavy artillery, tanks, aircraft, and warships. However, a senior U.S. defense official said that the effect of Russia's critical infrastructure bombardment has no significant effect on Ukraine's ability to resupply its forces. Meanwhile, Europe and the US continue to supply weapons to Ukraine and also sought to punish Moscow with sanctions, including oil ban and removing Russia's biggest bank from the international payment banking system, SWIFT. William, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has also asked the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Wednesday to help save the remaining people still trapped in the Azovstal steelworks in Mariupol. Back to you, William.
Yes, thank you, Joselito Liquido, reporting live.
Just this morning, Prime Minister Scott Morrison took to Australia's defense after accusations of invading the Solomon Islands were pointed at the country. Paul Gatchalian will give us the details live. Yes, Paul, go ahead.
Ariel, in his speech on Tuesday, Solomon Islands Prime Minister Manasseh Sogaver announced a new security deal with China amidst fears of the Solomon Islands being invaded. He raised the topic of the invasion among the national parliament, intending to increase security as they claim to have been threatened by military interventions if China sets up base in the islands.
What is more insulting, Mr. Speaker, in this attitude, and therefore totally unacceptable, is we are being treated as kindergarten students walking around with Colt 45s in our hands, and therefore we need to be supervised, Mr. Speaker. We are insulted, Mr. Speaker. We do not have to be warned, Mr. Speaker, to be aware of the working out of their strategy.
Furthermore, Prime Minister Manasseh expressed his disappointment with Australia as, according to him, the Solomon Islands were not notified of the AUKUS treaty signed by Australia, a treaty which could have impact on the Pacific Islands. In response to Sogaver, Prime Minister Scott Morrison defended the Australia's relations with the Pacific nation, further denying the claims of Australia conducting military intervention in the Solomon Islands. Despite these claims, Scott Morrison has expressed his willingness to continue to work with the Solomon Islands and their government, as they are family who Australia has continued to support. Marielle?
Thank you, Paul Gatchalian, reporting live.
U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, recommends Americans ages 2 and older to wear well-fitting masks on public transportation, including airports and train stations and other in crowded or poorly ventilated locations. The decision comes only 2 weeks after a district judge in Florida struck down the rule declaring the mask mandate unlawful. CDC has asked the Justice Department to appeal to the decision. However, no immediate court action has been sent from the government yet to reinstate the mandate. At the moment, CDC's announcement is only a recommendation and does not come as a mandate or carry the force of law.
In 2021, almost 193 million people in 53 countries suffered from food insecurity in what the United Nations state as an all-time high. Nerissa Dando will tell us why live. Yes, Nerissa, good evening.
Good evening, Marielle. The United Nations, or UN, reported on Wednesday that the number of people with not enough to eat on a daily basis increased by 40 million last year. This is due to a toxic triple combination of conflict, weather extremes, and economic effects of the pandemic. According to the joint report by the UN, the World Food Programme, and the European Union, countries experiencing prolonged conflicts had the most food insecure populations. This includes countries like Afghanistan, Congo, Ethiopia, Nigeria, South Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. Somalia is projected to face one of the worst food crises in the world this year due to prolonged drought, increasing food prices, and persistent violence. World Food Programme's chief economist Arif Hussein also stated the consequences of the Ukraine war during the press conference.
And we have also analyzed, what would be the impact of Ukraine crisis on global food insecurity, and what we see is that we expect another 47 million people to become acutely food insecure, meaning in crisis or worse situation. So altogether, that puts us to about 323 million people around the around the world.
The World Food Program is planning to reach as many as 145 million people this year, which will require financial support and sustained humanitarian access. The UN is calling for urgent support for rural communities to prevent the potential devastation that could be brought about by hunger and lost livelihoods in a massive scale. Back to you, Marielle.
Thank you, Nerissa Dando, for that live report.
North Korea fires ballistic missiles again from its capital region and flew to the waters off its eastern coast. Marvy Delfin tells us why live. Yes, Marvy, good evening. Go ahead.
Good evening, William. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un vowed to speed up the development of his nuclear weapons at the fastest possible pace and threatened to use them against rivals. The launch is the 14th round of weapons firing this year amid the United Nations Security Council's plans for further sanctions against North Korea's action. It wasn't immediately known what missile was launched by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or DPRK. South Korea's military said the missile flew about 290 miles, while Japanese officials who also detected the launch said it traveled about 310 miles at the maximum altitude of 500 miles. Meanwhile, North Korea's latest firing of ballistic missiles came just days before the inauguration of South Korean President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol. The new South Korean president vowed to boost Seoul's missile capability and solidify its alliance with the United States. William?
Yes, thank you. Marvy Delfin reporting live from Perth, Australia. Our kasangbahay, as the world faces these trying times amid the pandemic caused by coronavirus, we are inviting everyone to join the global prayer for humanity from Monday to Friday, 9:30 p.m. Philippine time through the social media accounts of Members Church of God International.
And before we close, we will leave you with a word giving glory to God from the book of James, chapter 4, verse 4. It says, "Ye adulterers and adulteresses, know ye not that the friendship of the world is enmity with God? Whosoever therefore will be a friend of the world is the enemy of God." And those are the reasons behind the news, May 5, 2022. Reasons we deliver to you as they unfold. I am Maria Latoza reporting live from Perth, Australia.
And because we need to know, we will always ask why. I am William Theo. We serve the people. We give glory to God.